All right, so if anyone gets this movie quote, I want to talk to them after the show. Eki, 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 patang, zoop, turn, den, mouth. Anyone? Yes! Monty Python Search for the Holy Grail. Those were the knights who until recently said ni. How about this one? Shumani tutanka wajimi yeyelu. Dances with Wolves! I love this audience! All right, so that was Kevin Costner saying, "My name is Dances with Wolves," in the film by the same title. As a child, I listened to movies differently than others. I came to be known for picking out these little bits of language and memorizing them and repeating them and performing them, savoring them. And my way of listening to films didn't make sense really to anyone, much less me, until I saw the film My Fair Lady. For those of you who don't know the film, Henry Higgins is a linguist. I didn't know there was such a thing. He takes a bet with his friend Pickering that he can change Eliza Doolittle from this lowly flower girl to a lady just by changing the way she talks. I was mesmerized. There were techniques, there were theories, there were machines, there was books. He could listen to someone talk for 2 seconds and tell you everything about them just by knowing how they talked. I wanted to be him. But by the end of that film, something shifted for me. I didn't like the new and improved Eliza. I felt like he killed her spark. And I couldn't articulate it at the time, but I felt like there was some presupposition that he had that his way of talking was better than her. And he ridiculed her accent. And I knew something about that. You see, we moved a lot when I was a kid. 3 times in junior high school. For any of you who are parents, I would not recommend this. I had an affinity for languages and I picked up accents, but what would happen was we would move. And then every time I opened my mouth became a declaration of how I was different. And in the politics of middle school, different is bad. I was bullied for having an accent. So when I became a linguist, I became a sociolinguist because, like Henry Higgins, I can see that language is tied to identity. And like Henry Higgins, I would want to educate people to change their lives if they can. If talking differently can give them access to different life experiences, I want that. But unlike Henry Higgins, I don't believe that this is predicated on a belief that how you grew up is wrong, and who you are when you talk the way that you talk needs to be reviled or denigrated in any way. And I had my Henry Higgins moment many years later as a graduate student of sociolinguistics. I was at a professional conference and we were shown rushes of a documentary film that was being produced called Do You Speak American? We had just been discussing how young was too young to teach linguistics in school, and we'd all collectively decided that probably high school, because you needed to know so much about history and sociology and the systematic patternings of syntactic and morphosyntactic change that we couldn't imagine anyone younger than 13 could really get into this. 9th grade, right? As we just heard. And then we see this film, and here's this 7th grader articulating with absolute clarity and pride about the language that he speaks, African American language, explaining the most complex theory that we have as linguists, the Creole hypothesis of origin of African American language, which is that historical facts show us that slave traders put people of different language families together in ships to bring them over to this country so that they could not communicate. And what happened was people forged a language that was West African syntax overlaid with English vocabulary. This 7th grader is telling us that when you hear something like copula deletion, like he funny, or you hear something like habitual be, like we be totally amazed at this child right now speaking, what you're hearing is history talking. I wanted on this project. And I learned that it was being filmed right here in Arlington, Virginia, so I answered every job ad. I networked like crazy. I found out I had people who were consulting on the film, friends of mine. I said, I will do anything. I will be copy editor. I will be coffee fetcher. I will be copy maker, whatever, anything to be on this film. And as the summer drew on and I had not gotten the job, I figured, well, maybe I had best start networking to try to get myself another summer internship. So I go to a graduate student happy hour that Georgetown had that May to drink away the excess budget of the Graduate Student Association. And figured either network or drown my sorrows, either way at work. And I don't know anyone at this particular happy hour, so I sit down and join a group engaged in the pastime of all happy hours, complaining about bosses. And the guy that I sit next to is telling everyone, can you believe this, guys? My boss today, get this. She says, I want you to hire a sociolinguist. And I say, I'm a sociolinguist. And he says, are you kidding me? And I say, what are you working on? And he says, oh, it's this documentary film called Do You Speak American? We're making a website. And I say, are you kidding me? I started to work 3 weeks later, and it turned out to be the hardest job I've ever had because it required everything of me. Not only did it require all of my sociolinguistic experience, but as it turned out, I needed to bring up all of this past history of the meaning of accents and language change. The first task I was given was a host of Eliza Doolittles in the form of the US presidents and the shifting meaning of accents in the mouths of US presidents. So Bill Clinton is portrayed in the film as a little bit shifty because he can change his accent at will. Well, I knew something about how that worked and why that was necessary for survival. And I knew something about the arbitrary meaning that gets attached to language and judgments that get made about you because of how you talk, such that LBJ is reviled for having a Texas accent, and then 30 years later, George Bush is celebrated. Or that why it is that when JFK deletes his ahs, he sounds like a Boston Brahmin, which is elite. But when Jimmy Carter does the same thing, he sounds ridiculous. But the thing that required the absolute most of me was the thing that the film got the most wrong, and we needed with the website to get the most right, was Spanish being framed as a threat somehow to English. We needed to get this right. This bilingualism needed to be portrayed correctly. And I could talk as someone who was raised in a bilingual country, and someone who was herself bilingual, and someone who'd lived in Latin America, and someone who'd lived at both borders of this country. And, God bless, it also took my improv training to help explain that yes and is how linguists approach language policy. Yes, English is very important, and it's a blessing to have another language. And it's a blessing to be able to be exposed to Spanish and any other language that we can. It helps our cognitive abilities. It helps us be better thinkers. Studies have shown that air traffic controllers who are bilingual are faster because they have two languages. So when I think back about my Henry Higgins identity, I guess it's a little bit of yes and as well, because it is a linguist, yes. And perhaps in my own weird way, I am like Arthur, engaged in this quest, trying to find ways to communicate what I know about language and language change and social identity, and a healthy dose of Dances with Wolves, empathy, and compassion and humility. Thank you.